Hey soccer fans, Nick here for the Feed the Fire podcast. Welcome back to this transfer player movement episode. We're looking at the latest Fire signings, league transfers, the re-entry draft, and we'll touch on a little of the preseason tournament that a number of MLS teams are going to be participating in. Let's dive right in because there's Fire news we got to cover. They did make a signing, but I want to start first with an article that Matt Doyle wrote for MLSsoccer.com where he kind of talks about the 5 teams to watch in the Eastern Conference this transfer window. And number 2 for him, the Chicago Fire. Also on his list, FC Cincinnati, Charlotte FC, New England Revolution, and Atlanta United. But number 2 for him is the Chicago Fire. And here's what he says about my hometown club here. Technically speaking, as new head coach and director of football Greg Berhalter gets going, Chicago have one DP slot open, but there is maybe no more obvious buyout candidate in the entire league than Gaston Jimenez, who's entering his 92nd season with the club and somehow keeps getting his deal renewed. I'll only break from the article real quick just to comment on that because I really do think Matt Doyle captures what it is to be a Fire fan and continually see Gaston Jimenez get extensions and new contracts and DP level deals. So thank you, Matt, for capturing that for everyone who is supporting the Chicago Fire. Now, his article continues. So I'm assuming Chicago will look for 2 new DPs, and I'm assuming owner Joe Mansueto, who's been among the highest spending owners in the league over the past decade, won't suddenly put his checkbook away. If you set the over-under at $30 million of new spend, I would hammer the over. Wow, that's a lot of money, guys. That is a lot to be spending. Those are like DP superstar level type players, right? Messi was a free agent, but his salary is $20 million. Are you thinking you're going to get someone kind of at that similar level right now? Matt Doyle looking at Joe Mansueto's money that you're spending for him? That would be insane. And there were rumors that they are looking for a very, very high-profile, impactful player, even someone with a better profile than Xherdan Shaqiri had before he came to this club. So nothing has come to fruition from those rumors. No light, no truth or anything. But, the Fire have been very good about keeping these types of things close to the chest, under their vest, close to their vest, whatever the phrase is, right? They've been doing a good job about keeping these things secretive until they're ready to announce it. So we'll see if that $30 million that Matt Doyle is spending for the club comes in the form of, 1 or 2 big DP players or over the course of, 6 or 7 new guys to fill out the roster. Doyle continues. Now that's before factoring in Chicago's open U22 initiative slot, which they just managed by sending Yorgos Koutsias on loan across the pond. Could Federico Navarro join him? It wouldn't shock me at all. Ooh, fans, that's interesting to think that Fede Navarro could get shipped over to Lugano. And if there are other clubs, as we learned with the Koutsias deal, if there are other clubs that were willing to make a bid for the player, then it doesn't really count against you if you're going to loan him out according to the roster rules. Or if you eventually are going to just straight up transfer him, you won't have to use your buyout on that player if you have other deals being proposed by other clubs. I mean, that's a good rule to have to get around this situation where you have one owner owning 2 different clubs and you just kind of ship them off. That way the MLS gets their cut and the players can still make their money. But yeah, in the case of Koutsias, supposedly there were at least 2 other firm offers from other clubs, which then allowed him to go to Lugano on loan, and the Fire don't have to use any sort of buyout in order to free up that U22 initiative. I wonder who those other 2 clubs were and where they're from. And could Federico Navarro get a similar type of move? But honestly, if it were me, if there are teams who are interested in Fede Navarro, just transfer him. I don't think he's going to get any better playing for Chicago under Greg Berhalter. The guy lacks discipline, and I don't know how they're going to be able to teach that to him. And they may be better off moving on from him and allowing Mauricio Pineda to come up into that slot, use the buyout on Gaston Jimenez, and bring in another defensive mid or central midfielder. Now Doyle concludes his article by saying this. Oh, and they've already done great work in the league by signing veteran centerback Jack Elliott, my favorite available free agent, to a deal this week. I'm not sure there will be more of that coming. Their cap remains a mess, but they're already a better team than they were at the end of October. Get those DPs right, though, and Chicago might actually make the playoffs. So it seems to be a bit of a positive outlook here from Matt Doyle. I guess as positive as you'll ever hear him talk about the Chicago Fire. He does take the shots like we saw with the Gaston Jimenez repeated deals. And, but knowing that they are going to spend money and they've already made a splash with Jack Elliott. So it looks to be a positive move. There is that one DP spot open now, too, if they buy out Jimenez, or at the very least try to buy him down. But the main point of all of this is they're in a better spot than they were in October, than they were at the end of the season. That's what we want right now in the offseason. You've got to be better on paper, and you've got to then translate that. It's up to the coach now to translate that to being better on the pitch. I still think they're a little bit shaky along the back line, and we definitely need more offensive talent. But, hey, it's only December 17th, right? That's where we're at today as I'm recording this. So that is something to keep an eye on, Chicago Fire fans. But speaking of, actually, let me digress a little bit. Even though Doyle says we are better than last year, that certainly was the case with the Chicago Fire in the 2023 offseason leading into the 2024 season. They got so much better on paper with Kuipers and Kutsia supposedly playing a bigger role, and even at the end of the season bringing in Ariel Lassiter on the wing and all the other pieces that they brought in at the beginning of that 2024 season. Kellen Acosta, anyone? They still failed miserably when it came to getting results on the pitch. Now, hopefully, Berhalter, as the director of sport and head coach, can change those kind of fortunes, but I will be completely okay for any Chicago Fire fan to say, guys, we've heard this all before. Let's wait until they play their first game, or until we get to the midpoint of the season, or until the season's over and whether or not they made the playoffs. And you got to remember, too, every team in the league is, in theory, getting better with every move that they make. So the Fire not only have to, and I've said this before, not only do they have to get from worst in the East to middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference to fight for that playoff spot, there's that jump, but then they also have to jump even further up, be even better with the deals they make, because other teams are also, in theory, getting better. Now, part of it is obviously with coaching. Berhalter is a much better coach than Klopas has been, that Hendrickson has been. So that is going to hopefully give them, half dozen more points, 5 to 6 more points, just out of not getting outcoached or making the adjustments to maintain a draw or maintain a lead, something like that. So you may see a little bit of improvement there, but it has to be with player acquisitions and getting the right players in the right spots. That's what's going to help this club make the biggest leap from bottom of the East to a playoff position. But speaking of the aforementioned Jack Elliott, this is the announcement from the club that came out yesterday, the 16th. The Chicago Fire have signed center back Jack Elliott in free agency. The longtime Philadephia Union defender is under contract through 2025 with an option for 2026, arriving as a centerpiece under new director of football and head coach Greg Berhalter. Okay, so it's a one-year deal with an option. I don't know, kind of a prove-it deal. Can he play somewhere outside of the Philadelphia system? Can he mesh with his fellow players along the back line, and Carlos Terran and Tobias Sahlquist and Wyatt Ohmsberg? Can he stay healthy? Let's see, how does it say his age in here? 29. So he is, by no means washed and old, especially for center backs. I don't think he's going to be that guy who's going to go bombing down the field, but still a guy who can get involved in the offense at times. So physically, age-wise, still in kind of the prime of his career here. So maybe they are going to say, here's your prove-it deal, and if you play this well, we'll pick up your option, give you an extension for a couple more years, or if there is some other opportunity that he would like to explore outside of MLS, then you never know, maybe they'll take that offer. So seems to be an okay business move, though. Just as a personal preference, I like seeing guys get locked up for 2, 3, 4 years. Now, I know that's really, really difficult in the salary cap league like Major League Soccer, because you don't want him on a bad contract. And I'm thinking with some of the new collective bargaining and free agent rules, players don't really want to be locked in that long with a single team because they want to explore free agency. They want to bet on themselves. So I guess this is kind of the best middle ground there, where it's a 1+1 kind of a deal, 1 year under contract with an option for a second, and hopefully that Jack Elliott plays well enough that the Fire can pick up that option and maybe extend him a year or two, and then can go focus on some other positions of need. But now we get to hear from Greg Berhalter on the signing of Jack Elliott. Berhalter says, Jack's decision to join the Fire as a free agent marks an important step in our efforts to build a highly competitive squad for next season. Jack's signing immediately strengthens our team as he brings extensive MLS experience, strong technical ability, and leadership along the back line. We're excited to welcome Jack to the Fire and look forward to his contributions on and off the field as we work toward achieving our goals. And that's again from head coach Greg Berhalter. The article continues, giving a little more background on Jack Elliott. It says the 29-year-old Englishman spent the past 8 seasons, since 2017, with Philadelphia, often shining along Jakob Glesnes. He's recorded 12 goals and 9 assists in 234 matches across the regular season and MLS Cup playoffs. And of course, we all remember his brace in the MLS Cup match against LAFC. Talks about his accomplishments with Philadephia Union, and then we close the article with a quote from Jack Elliott. I am genuinely excited for this next chapter at the Chicago Fire. I believe in the vision this organization has for this coming year and the club's future as a whole. I've never had a problem with being the underdog, and I can't wait to get to work with the group and prove to everyone what we are capable of. So great quote by him, ready to dive in, and I like that Elliott talks about the vision for the club. So that's what Berhalter was pitching to him in free agency. It wasn't, we're going to pay you a bunch. It wasn't, and they might, and it wasn't, you're going to be the starter. You're going to shine. Like, we're going to make you the face of the franchise. It was none of that sort of thing. It wasn't, you're the last piece of a championship squad. You're going to come in and we're going to compete for trophies. It was, we have a vision for this club. You fit that vision, and I think your vision for where you want to play fits Chicago. So real good approach from Berhalter here in order to bring in who many consider the top free agent in Major League Soccer this season. Let's hope he makes the impact. From a salary standpoint, Rafa Chihos was making $1.3 million, and Elliott last season was making, I want to say, upwards of $800,000 or around $800,000. So if they do give him a little bit of a pay raise, they still might be saving a little bit of money as compared to Rafael Chihos. And you're getting kind of that like-for-like signing, that veteran leadership, lead from the back, big physical presence, smart guy, knows the game. So they're going to get kind of that like-for-like, but hopefully Elliott can do it at just a little bit of a higher level than Chihos did. And he's still going to be there. Those offensive plays where Chihos was running to the back post, you may still see those, especially if that set-piece coach is still around. I hope he's not. And I hate to see your center back being your main target on set pieces or on some offensive sets going forward, but I suppose you got to mix it up every now and then to keep the defense guessing. I'll leave it at that. So that's the Jack Elliott signing from the Chicago Fire. 1-year deal plus an option, waiting to see what the reported salary will be for Jack Elliott. And of course, the MLS Players Association will release those numbers sometime towards the end of next season. But continuing on our theme of transfers and player movement here, just taking a walk around the MLS transfer tracker here online. I did tweet out and put on Facebook the webpage where MLSsoccer.com summarizes who's in and who's out with every club, and that's regularly updated. So go find that, bookmark it. That'll keep you up to date with all the latest, and it's really simple. Players in, players out. Real easy to look at. But some of the other noticeable moves that the league has made, Orlando City signed Colin Guskey from MLS Next Pro, FC Dallas signed Pedro Martins from MLS Next Pro, and as we know, the Chicago Fire have signed David Pareba from MLS Next Pro. So there's some talent now being developed coming up through that league, through that second tier of MLS here. Keep an eye on some of those guys in the minutes they'll get. The Union, not only have they let Jack Elliott walk in free agency, they actually signed Alejandro Bedoya to a new contract, a 1-year contract through the 2025 season. This is his 10th season at the club. He'll remain the captain, is from what the article suggests here, and he is definitely one of the more noticeable names in Major League Soccer nowadays, one who is happy to speak out for player issues, for social issues, but also one who can absolutely back it up on the pitch with his play. We'll see if his play declines a little bit. I don't think he was quite at the same level as he was last season in recent memory, or as he's been in recent memory, but the Union keep Alejandro Bedoya on their roster. DC United making some moves. They signed Brazilian winger João Pedro. Where is he coming from? He is coming from the Polish top flight Radomiak Radom, the club announced. He's a 22-year-old former Brazil youth international and is under contract through 27 with an option for 2028. So this is an aggressive attacker and who the scouting reports say he likes to go one-on-one against defenders. So that is going to be a very nice complement to Christian Benteke and some of the other role players there on DC United. So like we said at the beginning of the show, other teams are getting better. The Fire have to get even more better. Yeah, that makes sense. That's grammatically correct, right? The Fire have to get even more better than these other teams if they're going to fight for that playoff spot. And DC is a team looking to make moves similar to the Chicago Fire. A few other transfers of note. New York City transfer Nicholas Acevedo to a club in Brazil. Atlanta United have re-signed defender Ronald Hernandez. Real Salt Lake and Minnesota and San Diego all getting players in the re-entry draft. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but also we need to recognize that Orlando City has re-signed Kyle Smith, a defender. The Revolution have acquired center back Brian Ceballos, so they're trying to shore up a little bit of their defense. They were leaking goals at times last season. And as we knew from other talk here, LAFC have re-signed defender Aaron Long. And one other thing to keep an eye on, Atlanta United have re-signed for Jamal Tiare. Okay, so those are some of the big names moving around the transfer portal here in Major League Soccer. So keep an eye on a lot more to come, and I'll do my best to kind of give a lightning round like that every so often. But we now transition into the MLS Re-Entry Draft. And for those of you who don't know, the Re-Entry Draft is, to summarize it simply, it's just a way for players who are out of contract, who don't have free agent deals, to come back in and get selected by a team, and they get the rights to negotiate a contract with them. The re-entry draft is conducted in 2 stages. Stage 1 was on December 13th. Stage 2 will be on the 19th, and every club has the opportunity to take part in it, but they're not required to select players, and we'll see many, many clubs have actually passed on taking players in the re-entry draft. And why would they do this? Well, they may not meet their roster designations for international spots, domestic spots, DPs, TAMGAM, whatever it is. They might just not have the availability to do it, or maybe they want to wait and kind of negotiate with these players in free agency rather than through the re-entry draft. Or maybe they're doing some scouting, or maybe they just don't fit the mold. So that's a lot of different reasons why a club would not participate in the MLS re-entry draft, though a handful have. So to recap, the rules of the re-entry draft are that players 22 years of age or older with at least 1 year in MLS who do not have a contract or offer are eligible for the draft. Players can even opt out of the draft by submitting notice to the league, and if they do that, the club will maintain the right of first refusal for that player and will have to get the player's consent for a trade. If a club, franchise, whatever you want to call it, chooses a player in the stage 1 of the re-entry draft, they must either exercise an option for that player or extend a bona fide offer. Clubs may not select players from their own club who are eligible in the re-entry draft in this first stage. And if they do have a current option on their contract, it's automatically added to the drafting club's roster. Again, they're forced to exercise the option if they don't make the bona fide offer. If the club makes the bona fide offer and it is rejected by the player, the drafting club maintains the right of first refusal, but then they're playing under that option if it's there. So that's stage 1. Now stage 2, if anyone's not selected in stage 1, you can move on to stage 2. You can still opt out at this point because there's a little different rules in stage 2. If a club selects a player in stage 2, they have 7 days to make an offer to the player. If the club and player cannot reach an agreement, club retains right of first refusal within MLS. And again, clubs may not select their own players until all other clubs decline to select the player. So you can't take your own player in round 1, but you have to wait until everyone else passes to take your player in round 2. So in this case, it's almost kind of like a waiver rule in other sports that we see, that you're going to waive your player because he's not performing, he's not living up to his contract. Everyone else is going to pass on him, so now you can renegotiate the contract. You're not stuck with anything previously agreed upon. So in stage 1, the Chicago Fire actually had the second overall pick in the re-entry draft, and then in stage 2, again, the second pick there, and every club had one pick in the re-entry draft. I don't think anyone traded or sold or anything like that their re-entry draft selection spot, if they even can. I'll have to go look that up in a little bit of a deeper dive into these MLS rules. However, there were a handful of players selected in the re-entry draft in stage 1. Real Salt Lake selected Forster Ajago from Nashville. He's a forward that was formerly playing in the black and gold, not the black and gold, I got to come up with a better nickname for Nashville. We'll just call it Nashville. Forster Ajago from Nashville, now going to Real Salt Lake, and we'll see if they can get a contract done. Kip Keller going from Cincinnati to Minnesota United. That's a name to look out for, because he has played throughout St. Louis and Austin and Cincinnati now. So he started his pro career in 2019 and had, some mild success, but he's in the MLS. He's a big defender. He's 6'1", and you know what? I think this is a guy who can be a solid backup at worst. And Minnesota, I think, was able to say, hey, we can make something of this guy. I think if you want to look at it like in Major League Baseball, where you have a team and you've got a closer and he just keeps giving up hits or keeps tipping his pitches or whatever it is, there's always another team out there who's like, you know what? I can fix this guy, and we're going to take a chance on him. We're going to get him for a couple years. So I think Minnesota United looked at Kip Keller and said, you know what, we can use him a lot better than Cincinnati did, especially with Cincinnati having a number of good starting center backs. So Minnesota picked up probably one of the best players available in the re-entry draft. San Diego FC, of course, as the expansion team, they're looking to pick up players in any way possible. They select Jacob Jackson, a goalkeeper from the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, he ended up getting his pro start in 2018 with the Real Monarchs in the USL, and then has bounced between New England, San Jose, and now San Diego. He's had time with the first team as well as New England Revs 2 and the Town FC, which is San Jose's MLS Next Pro team. So Jacob Jackson likely competing for that backup spot as the keeper in San Diego. And again, stage 2 of the draft is coming up in a couple of days, so keep an eye to see if there's any teams who try to renegotiate contracts with their players or maybe find a steal somewhere down that roster. As far as guys who are available who you want to keep an eye on, the names that jumped off the page to me were first Nico Gioachinni. Like, if you remember him from kind of fringe USMNT play a couple years ago to being taken by by St. Louis in their expansion season. He ended up getting a contract with Como in Serie A and then loaned back to FC Cincinnati. So this is a player who, he's got some MLS experience, got some international experience, got some USMNT experience a little bit, but maybe hasn't produced at the level that MLS teams are looking for from their primary striker, or even a secondary striker at that. I don't think he saw the pitch much with FC Cincinnati this last season, and probably the reason that he wasn't taken is Como still has the rights to him, but because he was on Cincinnati's roster and is not being extended or anything by Cincinnati, he ends up in the re-entry draft. And now that I say that out loud, I might want to take back that Como has his rights, but they may have some rights to him. I doubt that he's going back to Como and also eligible for re-entry draft in MLS unless there's an extended loan. A lot of contract things that we're probably not going to learn about unless Gioachinni comes back to MLS as his own player or as a free agent, but I think that is what's scaring some teams away from him, is that they're going to have to deal in some way, shape, or form with the Italian club. The other name that jumped out, Yaw Yeboah, he is out of contract with Columbus. Many people thought that San Diego would take him in the expansion draft. However, when he's out of contract, why would you waste a draft pick on him? You can negotiate with him as a free agent. So keep an eye for San Diego to maybe snatch him up in the expansion draft here. They will have, in the re-entry draft. However, they are the last team. They select 30th in the re-entry draft, and it goes by rank here. So San Diego as the expansion team, they just got their expansion draft. They got those players, so they're the last to select in the re-entry draft. Galaxy, Red Bulls are the next two to select. That's why San Jose was the first team to select, followed by the Chicago Fire and Sporting Kansas City as the next two teams to select there. So that's a guy to keep an eye out. Maybe there's a team that selects him and tries to work something out with him for an experienced MLS defender. And finally, the other name that jumped off the page, Montreal midfielder Ilas Iliadis, and that's just because I would love to see this Greek kid continue his career here in Major League Soccer, purely for the Greek connection. But last season with Montreal, he made no appearances. But 2 seasons ago, he had, I think, about a dozen appearances for the club. So a guy with some skill, with some talent, maybe a victim of circumstance up in Montreal, who might be a decent depth piece for teams in Major League Soccer at this point. So a few guys to keep an eye on there. Lastly, I want to talk about a preseason tournament. We are all desperately waiting for MLS to release its schedule so we can all start making our plans, what away games we're going to, what tickets we may want to sell or transfer. But at least the preseason tournament is out now, and that's the Coachella Valley Invitational. This tournament's been around for several years. It continues to grow, and this year you're going to see 14 MLS clubs participating and 6 NWSL clubs participating. The tournament will run from February 1st through February 22nd. The MLS clubs will play from February 1st to the February 15th, and the NWSL clubs will play on the 16th and the 22nd of February. Chicago Fire will get 4 matches. They will get matches against LAFC, Portland, San Jose, and the Galaxy. So really solid cross-section of the Western Conference that the Fire are going to match up against. Notably, there is no matchup between Eastern Conference teams. The Eastern Conference teams will only play Western Conference teams in this tournament. Now, that's not the same for the Western Conference. I think they have the bulk of the teams in this tournament. Yep, and I'll run down the list of them. But yeah, interesting to note that this is no way that the Fire can go scout some Eastern Conference opponents at least the day they play them. I'm sure they'll be looking at them throughout the course of the tournament. Now, the Fire participated last year in this tournament with mixed results, but it's still a preseason tournament. It's a chance to get some chemistry going, get up to full game speed, evaluate your fitness, evaluate your depth on your bench, and by the time this tournament is underway, clubs should know who their starters are. These are like the preseason NFL games. Your starters are only going to get one probably lengthy game, 60 minutes or something. Most of them are probably going to play 30 to 45 minutes. You're going to see heavy rotation, but it's a way, again, get to full speed, check your fitness, evaluate your depth, chemistry, maybe see, okay, in this case, I want to put Chris Mueller staying out on the wing, and maybe in this game, I want to see Chris Mueller playing a little tighter, more inside, and see if Gutierrez can make some overlapping runs. Again, it's just a random example. I don't know if they'll actually do that. It's probably not even that good of an idea to bring Mueller centrally and shift Gutierrez out on the wing. However, that was just the first example that came up of an odd tactical change that a team might want to try out in a preseason tournament here. Now, the teams that are participating, in alphabetical order here, Austin FC, Charlotte FC, Chicago Fire, the Galaxy, LAFC, Minnesota United, New York City, Portland, Real Salt Lake, New York Red Bulls, San Diego FC. It's going to be a big tournament for them. St. Louis City, San Jose Quakes, and Sporting Kansas City. So those are the MLS teams that'll be preparing and training